Welcome to the Route to Success, where you hear from leaders who do not just follow systems, they build them. Today's conversation is with someone who has spent decades shaping how modern commerce works, often without recognition, but with massive impact. Our guest, Richard Halter, began his career in, you know what? I'm not going to say the year because he's full of wisdom, and I want this to be a really relevant conversation. And he's been at the forefront of some of the most important shifts in retail technology, from early online credit card authorization to helping build the foundation of e-commerce, which Richard sometimes, I don't know, I shop too much online, so now I know who to blame for it. No, just kidding. To pioneering omni-channel point of sale systems used around the world. And his work has influenced how businesses operate at scale today. He has trained more than 1,600 experts, contributed to global retail standards, and worked across industries and continents to solve problems that did not yet have solutions. Now he's focused on one of the most important shifts of our time, helping leaders understand artificial intelligence, not as a tool, but as a system that learns, evolves, and accelerates everything around it. I'm so excited for this conversation. I love learning about AI. So this episode breaks down innovation, problem solving, and what it takes to stay ahead when you are building what does not yet exist. Richard, welcome to the show. I'm so excited for this conversation today.
By the way, you didn't have to worry about telling me my age. I think the gray hair gave it away.
Well, I was being respectful, and I want people to focus on your wisdom and your experience because you have a lot to offer. And I will say, just for full disclosure, Richard and I were on an advisory board together, and I got to hear him add lots of pieces of wisdom and lots of conversation in a meeting. So I invited him to come to the podcast. We had a great conversation. Since then, we've emailed back and forth. So I feel like I have a pretty good established, I would say, professional friendship with Richard. So this is going to be a little bit of a different podcast because I feel like we're really going to be able to laugh and joke, which is great. So let's jump in.
Go for it.
Richard, you've been in technology since the beginning and have had what you describe as an enormous number of firsts. What experience stands out as the moment you realized you were building something new, not just following a path?
When you asked me that question, I never really thought about it in that context. I was always given a job to solve some problem, and I went off and did it. Some were very, very complicated ones. Some were fairly easy ones. My latest work, though, is the stuff that I'm building right now is innovative. It is something that is based on all of those years of retail technology knowledge, all of that training I got from all of those subject matter experts. And I was able to see the broad retail landscape over traditional ones. Most people in retail, they know their business. They know customer relationship management, or they know inventory management, but they don't know the whole scope of everything. And I have that. And that has led to what we're getting ready to release. That is a retail technology tool that is based on AI. And it's going to be quite innovative when it gets out there.
I can only imagine. So I don't know if I've shared with you, Richard, the way that I think of AI. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. So I think of it as the computer on Star Trek, but more like Next Generation Voyager, where you can talk to it, it gives input, you give input, and you work together to solve a problem. So I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with AI. And so I'm really excited to see because it's taught me a lot already. It just like the year, well, I guess I've been using AI about 3 years now. And I feel like it's made me better all around. So I'm excited to see what you have. And I like to put that out there because I know a lot of people maybe have a fear of AI or think negatively of it, but it's the way of the future, right? And what I always tell people is AI is only as good as the information that you give it. It's not going to replace jobs. It's just going to make you better at what you do. So that's my on technology, because I'm a writer, perspective of that. So let's move on. You've been called the unknown creator of e-commerce and played a key role in omnichannel point of sale system. It's a big phrase. When you look back, what do you think allowed you to see opportunities that others have missed?
In this case, in the e-commerce case, actually, the Tulsa World, a newspaper in Tulsa, Oklahoma, wanted to start selling access to their archives. And this was in 1994, 95, back in that time frame. The internet was brand new. And at that point, when you had somebody do something and they pay for it, they had to call into a call center and give them their credit card number. And then the call center person would enter it into the system. It was expensive. And when you start looking at archives, you want to keep the cost down as much as possible. So they wanted the ability to have the customer do it directly online. And they asked me to do that. So I built the first online credit card authorization system. And when I got it certified, Visa told me that it was the first one to have been done. So nobody else had done what I had just done. And I was telling that to one guy, and to me, it was just a tool. I didn't even think anything special about it. And he's the one that told me that I was the unknown father of e-commerce. And I was very quickly telling, hey, don't tell my wife I'm in trouble if you tell me that. So that's where that came about. The omni-channel point of sale system was again because of all of the retail knowledge that I had from all of the various standards groups what we was working with. A company called Retalix in Israel had invited me to come over and show them how to do it using all of the art standards. So I went to Israel and taught them how to build it. And I didn't think much about it. I just said, hey, here it is. Learn how to do it. Go for it, man. And they built it. And this is in 2010. In 2013, they came out with it at the NRF's big show. And that's the first time I realized that they had built this omni-channel point of sale based on the architecture that I laid out for them. So that was the first one. Prior to that, people had been taking their existing point of sale systems and kind of patching stuff on to make it work. This was the first one that was native, built from the ground up. And they were so successful with it that NCR bought the company, and it's now called the Emerald point of sale system at NCR. So the foundation architecture for that was my work.
That's impressive.
One of the interesting things, when I was in Israel, I got to see several sites, which, you go to Israel, you got to look around. I mean, geez, that's the foundation of everything in the world, right?
Exactly.
So I went to the Wailing Wall and I put a prayer in, and my prayer was very simple. It simply said, help me help others. And that's been the foundation of my life.
I love that. I love, Richard, I have a very similar thing that I work on. I'm like, how can I invest in other people? Professionally, I work with nonprofits as a consultant and a grant writer. And so I like to think, how can I invest in them? How can I give more? How can I make their jobs easier because of what they're doing is so important because of what they're giving to others. And I love that alignment between us. I think that's why we clicked. It says, how can I help others? How can I invest in this organization so they can do more?
That's it. That's just, and I've done that in the last 15 years. I've probably helped 20 startups start their company. Some were very, very successful. Some failed, as you would expect. They didn't follow my advice. I like to say that. But there was one that's in particular that I was the gentleman's name was Noah Glass. He's the CEO of Olo. It's an online ordering system. And he came to us and asked to help put together a self-service order interface standard and show how to use the art standards to do that. And basically, I put the document together to show him, well, lo and behold, he took it off and built it, right? And just recently, his company went over $1 billion in sales, and he was put on the stock exchange, and he ended up being bought by another company. And I like to claim that it was all because of my work. Right?
I think it was probably a lot of it was because of your work. That's a good story. Okay. So this is something I'm really interested in because I love doing this. And so I'm really looking forward to learning from you. So you've been involved in solving problems that had no existing blueprint, right? Like it literally, here's a brand new problem. We don't know how to solve it. We've never encountered it. When you hit a wall, what was your process for figuring things out and moving forward?
When you asked me that question, I sat there thinking about it, and I mean, I've solved some incredibly complicated problems. Um, I was part of the way back in the 1970s. They built a three-dimensional seismic exploration system. I was working for an oil company, and we had 8 processors. This was like in the early 1970s, like I said, and they wanted to make them operate independently, but in synchronization. And so I had to come up with a very unique architecture so that they would communicate with each other without slowing each other down and without one slowing down another one. Um, and I simply went home and started thinking about it. And I just kind of watched things going on around me, and I started realizing that, hey, this little kid, he's doing his thing, and that little kid's doing their thing, and together they're playing basketball, and so I started realizing how to solve that problem. And I never really ran into a problem that I couldn't solve. And many times, whenever I came up with the unique problem, uh, I had a solution in my head. Uh, when we did the e-commerce one, I mean, it took me about 10 minutes to figure out how to build that. So I've never run into one that was a severe challenge had to think about. Um, I would it just come by it naturally. I think I'm not only a geek, but I'm also a creative type person. And I think the merge of the two together is probably what makes the problem solutions much easier for me.
I would agree. I think your creative side definitely is a lot of it because when you're creative, you're able to see what others can't and you're able to make things that others can't make. And I think also too that creativity gives you how do I want to say it? It lessens your fear to try new things because you're like, well, if it doesn't work this way, I can tweak something and it'll work a different way. It gives you a lot of solutions all at once. And I loved how you watched two kiddos playing basketball and that provided a solution. Um, I think that's really unique, but I think it gives a lot of insight into the power of perspective, clearing your perspective, and looking at life in a unique way.
It does, and uh, when you talk about creative, I have done so many creative things that have led down the wrong path, so to speak. And my wife keeps telling me, "You dummy."
You know, I always like to say, and this is the way that I raised my daughter, the way I run my business, there's no such thing as failure if you've learned from it. And so if you can learn, if you can grow, then you've never failed, right? You've just stretched a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've done some pretty strange things in my life, right? So
I have too. I'm sure we could probably trade some. I like to call them war stories. I'm sure that we
hey, how long is this thing supposed to be?
right? I think you and I could talk for 2 more hours on this. Okay. I want to talk about training. So something that I love to do besides writing is teaching and training. Um, and you've trained over 1,600 subject matter experts on different standards and technological standards. And I think for this question, let's just not think about technology and POS right now, right? Let's think about standards and why standards are important when you're training people. So my question is, why are standards so critical, and what happens when organizations try to scale without them?
That is the number one problem in retail technology. Retailers' number one problem is putting things together. When when each vendor builds their application, they have their own technology staff, and these are creative people. And a part of who we are is we think we know the best way to do things. It's just part of our nature, right? And so we build stuff that we think is the right way to build stuff. Well, you do that in one company and somebody else does it in another company, and somebody has to put the two of them together to make them work. And that's where the standards come into play. In 1993, I think it was, the uh, five major retailers came together and said, this is our number one problem. We've got to solve it because it's a nightmare when you start adding new applications or upgrading existing applications. Think about it. You've got 40,000 stores and you're going to add a new application to it. Well, not all 40,000 stores are going to be on the same version of the software. They're going to be on software that came from different vendors. So they're going to have this real crash between the two. If you call something a product and I call the same thing an item, somebody has to figure out the translation so that we have a common set. And that's the huge problem that standard solves. Um, Today, it's changing a little now, but today, when you upgrade software, it can take several years to get it through your entire ecosystem simply because of the sheer volume and sheer crowd. And if some of your stores using different vendor software, you've got another piece of the puzzle to mix because somebody else may call it some other thing, right? So it's a massive, massive problem. And standards are simply the way to solve that problem. And now when you get into the AI world and you get into the omnichannel world and you get into the in-store versions of it and people start using their cell phones, you've got that problem is multiplied over and over. And that's where the the cloud-based world comes in to help solve. But again, you've got to use terms that everybody knows, because when the store owner decides that he wants to find out, am I making any money? He's got to know all of those numbers add up and they all relate. If I have to buy 1,000 new shirts, well, what do we call them in this store versus what do we call them in that store? It's just a huge problem, and that's where the standards come in to solve it.
I think too, standards help create that baseline, and they also define success. So you could see and measure the success that you're making towards any change. Because I found so often working with clients, if we don't define what that baseline is, and then we don't say this is what success looks like, they never know where they are in the process or if they've been successful. And standards really helps with that.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, right? You want to ultimately know, uh, am I got all of the right product to sell in the right store? Walmart had an interesting issue several years ago where they were sending Chinese type food to a Mexican area, and they were sending the Mexican food to a Chinese area. And the corporate didn't realize that they'd screwed up like that. But the two store managers got together and decided to swap the stuff so that they could properly sell what they were selling to their customers, right? And so having standards makes all of that stuff smoother and easier, right?
As well as good communication skills.
Yeah, you got to be able to talk.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about executives. This could be interesting. So you've spent years translating complex technology for executives. What are most leaders getting wrong about AI today, and how should they be thinking about it differently?
They think about this is one of the things that I've just recently come to realize that people treat AI like it's an application. They're used to working with things like Word and Excel. And so the concept of an application doing a specific task is in their head, right? It's embedded. And I was on several calls with AI companies, and the AI companies themselves were thinking about their work as an application. And they weren't really realizing it wasn't an application. It's more like a 2-year-old. You know, you take a 2-year-old and you want to teach them how to eat. So you give them a spoon. First, they got to figure out which side of the spoon to put the food on. Then they got to figure out how to get the food into their mouth without dropping it all over themselves. And so it's a slow circular learning effort. You do something, you make a mistake. You do something, you make a mistake. And AI is more along that line of a 2-year-old learning, right? And it's a what I it call it just a closed loop feedback system rather than an application. And when you think about it in a broader aspect, it's more like hiring an employee than it is buying an application. Because this employee you're going to assign it some task. It's going to do whatever that task is. It's going to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And the next time, do a little better job. And eventually, it'll be doing it perfectly. But it's a slow learning process. It's not an application where you've got a bug and you got to call the company back and say, hey, you got a bug in your software, fix it. AI will fix it for itself.
So, as this closed loop system, as AI kind of operating like a 2-year old, what's the best way to interact and teach, train the AI?
Well, that's where information comes into play, right? There's a ton of information out there on everything, right? And you take that information and you feed it into the AI system in a learning phase. And so the AI system learns from that stuff. It's not complete. It still misinterprets things. We find that out now when people ask it questions and it gives them the wrong answer. That's simply because it hasn't learned the right answer yet. And it will eventually learn the right answer. Pretty soon it'll be perfect, so to speak. But it's a training exercise. You can take in the AI world. Again, you start with information, but you can start feeding in social media. You can start feeding in all kinds of other sources of information and make a broader knowledge base for your AI application. I have done a similar kind of thing with the retail technology. I in watching all of the standards that were built, they were all built in silos. And I've now built an application that ties all the silos together to actually execute a retail application. So it can be a foundation for an AI system.
I like the way that you describe thinking of AI as like a 2-year old child, because I think that gives you the patience to understand, hey, we're learning, we're growing together. And I find, and this will make you laugh, but a great deal of kindness goes a long way too with AI, right? Not yelling at it, but being like, hey, let's try that again. Hey, I think I gave you the wrong information. Let's work at it from this. And I don't know if maybe it's just the kindness jerks to your perspective or what, but I find that that kindness, the patience, and the willingness to educate, train, get better results. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's just like teaching a 2-year-old to eat, right?
Yeah.
It's a slow, patient process that takes time. Now, in the case of AI, when I say slow, we're talking about a few seconds versus,
Right.
a few months, right? So it's a difference in speed.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you're working toward building a school of retail technology. What problem are you trying to solve with this, and why is there such a large gap in knowledge today?
That came about because I've trained major retailers worldwide. We're talking about the Costco's, the Home Depots, the Macy's, those kind of companies. And one common thing came out of every one of the training sessions when I taught them about the standards. Somebody would come to me and say, I didn't know that. Mm. Now, when you stop and think about these major companies, they're making billions of dollars. They know their business. They don't know retail. So they're focused on what they know, which is good. I mean, I'm not saying that's wrong, but when they hire new hires, the new hires are hired in the development environment because they can write code. They can design systems, right? They're not hired because of the in-depth retail knowledge. Most everybody's retail knowledge is you go into a store, you pick up a pair of pants, you insert the credit card, and you've paid for it. And their knowledge of retail is about that deep. It is much, much more deep. I was the guy that led a group called POS Log, which is the information that comes out of the point of sale. Today, that message model has over 7,000 attributes in it. So you can imagine how complicated retail technology is and how little knowledge people have when they start in that world. And so they make the same mistake. They make because they don't know. So I figured we got to have a school of retail technology just to teach people the inner workings of all of the various systems in retail. And that's why I'm trying to sell that.
I get it. I think it's a good idea. I think we as humans have the tendency to operate silos, and we forget the connection that is needed to move forward. And maybe some of that is remote working, maybe some of that is human nature, but it is all about that connection and connecting ideas. And it's hard when you don't know where to start.
You don't have a good base. It's just like running an AI without having that proper knowledge base to start it with. It's going to make mistakes, and developers make mistakes. They produce code that has problems with it.
Yeah. So Richard, I know I didn't talk to you about this question before, but I think you're going to be okay with this. Can you explain the Wizard of POS? Can you talk to us and tell us that story?
Okay. I have worked in not only retail. Now, but to me, first off, retail is anybody who sells anything.
Right.
And if you're selling a shirt, if you're selling a hamburger, if you're selling a battleship, you're selling an item, and that item has the same set of attributes, price, quantity, that kind of thing. So I've worked with the convenience store industry. I've worked with the hospitality industry, the pharmacy industry. What else? A variety of various industries, right? And I came to realize that they all relate the same. So I was talking with a guy in Arizona who was running the hospitality industry, and he looked at me and he said, you're the Wizard of POS. Okay. So this guy lived in Arizona. So I was talking that very same week with a gentleman in Chicago in the convenience store industry. And he said, you know what? You're the Wizard of POS. And I went, okay, I got 2 strikes on me. So this was in October. And in January at the National Retail Federation show, Lexmark had a booth that was the Wizard of POS booth. So I got a picture of me standing next to Dorothy with my face up on a big screen like the Wizard of POS. And I said, okay, 3 strikes. I got to adopt that as my name. So
I love it.
I adopted the Wizard of POS.
So Richard, what is a thought that you could leave somebody with as we are entering into this next phase of technology? What is something you would say to somebody who was maybe worried that they were going to lose their job or scared of the changes? How would you reassure them?
One thing about retail, and it's happened throughout When they went from the horse and buggy to the automobile, everybody said that people were going to lose their job. And yeah, the guys that make buggy whips, yeah, they lost their job. But look at how many millions of other jobs have been created, right? In the AI world, AI will help with a lot of things, but AI doesn't have creativity that people have, right? And so it's not going to take away every job. It's just going to take away the ones that are more manual. And what you're seeing right now, the robots that are running with AI in them, they're used in warehouses to move packages around, right? Well, that's what people did, right? So any person who was going to move packages around probably would lose their job, but they're going to they need them in other places, right? So it always changes. It creates more than it eliminates. It's never been less. So far, there's never been a technology evolution that reduced the total number of jobs. They've always increased them.
I love that. And if people want to watch your YouTube videos and learn from you, where can they find you?
Oh, I have a YouTube channel. Great question, by the way. I forgot about that. My YouTube channel is about educating senior executives on the concepts of retail technology without getting into the nuts and bolts. What I've found is that the retail executives made it to their position because of the working through the operations side. They're not geeks, right? 90% of them are not geeks, right? They know the terms, but they don't know what they mean, right? And so to help them understand this stuff, I started creating YouTube videos that are written and I've eliminated the mathematics and all of the detailed technical knowledge and provided an overview of various areas. You want to know about AI in retail? There's a whole video on that, right? You want to know about something called blockchain. Well, if you're in the Bitcoin world, blockchain is the underlying infrastructure that makes Bitcoin work, but it is incredibly complicated, right? I've made a video that tried to explain it in a simplified form so that you as an executive can understand it without being a geek, right? So when you talk to your technology folks, you can understand what it is they're trying to talk about. And my channel is called Richard the Geek.
And I would venture to say it sounds like the videos are for more than just executives. If you're looking for ways to understand technology, ways to connect with your kids, to connect with coworkers, to just learn and educate yourself, I'd say Richard the Geek's YouTube channel is probably the place to start.
And in fact, I've just released a series of 8 videos. I've got a 9th one to create on agentic retail operations. And it talks about retail and the operational side. So you're starting to see the merging of the two and how they support each other. When you really think about AI, the technology, the information is the foundation, right? And built on top of that is the AI component that then queries that information to make decisions with. So they go hand in hand. They fit like hand in glove kind of thing. But I've got a whole series of videos out there to help you understand it. And so far, the reviews I've got on them have been pretty good. So,
Well, I'm sure they're wonderful. I know talking to you, I always learn something. So I appreciate your time.
yeah. Hey, I love talking about what I know.
Not a lot of people do. Not a lot of people do. But Richard, I wanted to thank you for being here today. And I want to thank you for talking about your YouTube channel because I think that was one of the things I really want. Like, I know that was one of the tools I really wanted to leave people with today was how to learn from you because you're so easy to learn from. And I love that you showed that innovation is about curiosity. And as we progress and as technology progresses, there's literally nothing to fear, right? As you so candidly pointed out, more jobs are always created. So we're on the cusp of something great. So if you're wanting to learn, interested in trying something new, I think start with Richard's channel, investigate a little bit, learn a little bit, maybe talk to him, reach out, and lose your fear and step forward. I think it's going to be great. What do you think, Richard?
That's true. And if you want to get down into the actual details and learn the intricacies of this thing, I've got a book out there called Arts for Retail, right? So you can become a geek as I am.
I love it. I love it. Well, Richard, thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you for all the laughs and thank you for being amazing. I really appreciate it today.
Hey, no problem.